If you could go back to your 21-year-old self and tell him something that maybe he needed to hear, what would that be?
I would tell him to...
Welcome back to Wildly Empowered Women. I have with me former carpenter turned multi-six-figure business owner, Morgan T. Nelson.
What personal branding is how can I build enough love with my audience? How can I build enough trust with my audience?
Morgan has 214 episodes on his podcast, and also what you teach is so freaking valuable for women in the space of business and personal development.
The one thing that no one could ever take away from you is your...
Yes, such value in that. I hope you guys are loving this.
The number one asset in the world is not bricks and mortar. It's not businesses. It's not the stock market. It is...
Welcome back to Wildly Empowered Women. I am so excited to have our first male guest on the podcast today. I have with me former carpenter turned multi-six-figure business owner, someone who was financially free at 23 and made his first $1 million at 28 years old, Morgan T. Nelson. Now, I have been very excited for this episode because the reason I've been off the podcast for a little bit has actually been because I've been working so closely with Morgan on actually relaunching this podcast. And Morgan has a top 10 podcast in the personal development niche. He's the founder of Dream Out Loud, which is an incredible personal development method. And he's someone that I look up to so much for what he's actually built in his personal brand, which is what I'd love to talk on today. We talk a lot about personal branding on this podcast because it is such an important part of building your business. So we're going to dive into that today, and also how to know when to invest in your business and when to invest in your own personal growth as well. So thank you so much for joining me and for being the very first male on the podcast.
I'm so fired up to be on here. It's funny, like when you said, you're like, welcome back to the Wildly Empowered Women. I'm like, that's funny. I forgot that this is just for women. So hello, ladies. Let's get into it.
So good. And look, Morgan has 214 episodes on his podcast. He knows what he's talking about. And this podcast is for women. And also what you teach is so freaking valuable for women in the space of business and personal development. So it is, awesome to have you on.
Yeah, I'm fired up. Like a lot of my audience, actually, I think about 60% of my audience are actually women. And a lot of our events will have more women attend. And it's funny, there's actually... So one of my 3-day events, that Dream Out Loud method, a whole section, nearly about half a whole of one of the days is all on relationships. And we do like a deep dive into, like in how relationships really impact your business and your life. Because I think the 3 main areas of life is health, wealth, and relationships. And you've got to tick those boxes. And if one of them is kind of missing, or going down, it's going to really impact the others. If you've got shit health, you're not going to really care about how much money you got, how good your relationship is. If you don't have any money, eventually it's going to be like, I want to be able to do more in this world. And if your relationship sucks, it's going to rub off in your business in all areas. So we include that. And, one of our events, we had about 90 to 95% of the audience were only women. And that was freaking hilarious because like I roast the women and I roast the guys and we make fun of, but like the guys just got fucking roasted because like there was like only a few of them in the audience. So, I'm very used to sort of delivering some goods and for, women in business. So yeah.
Let's do it. That's awesome. So let's talk about how you went from sort of, being in the online business space and building an incredible network marketing business to getting into podcasting. Because I did your course 18 months ago, and it's why I started the podcast, and it's why I had the confidence to actually do that. There was so much value in your course. What led you down the path of starting a podcast to begin with?
Well, I was actually sitting in Maryland, Ocean City, Maryland in the United States years and years and years and years ago. And I just had the thought, I was like, I want to create a podcast. And like anything, right? Anything big or anything new, anything, outside of our normal comfort zone, often we meet, the imposter syndrome or the limiting beliefs and all these sorts of things. So I had the idea, I was like, I want to create a podcast. I want to, create this brand because I found myself listening to so many. And I just thought, at what point in my life am I going to stop consuming content And when am I going to start creating content? And so I really wanted to. And then what happened was all the imposter syndrome kicked in and saying things like, are you sure now is the right time for you? Like, you should just be focusing on your business and all these sorts of things. And what happens is the more you overcome imposter syndrome, it starts to become really, really intelligent. It outsmarts you. And so it doesn't say things like, oh, but no one's going to listen to you. I was like, no, if I build it, it's going to be amazing. But it started saying things like, yeah, but are you sure you have the right time right now? Do you have the bandwidth to do it? And I was like, oh, yeah, probably not. So I talked myself out of it for 18 months. And then COVID happened. I had a whole year. I had about 6 to 7 months planned out for events. I was going to be speaking in, I think, 5 or 6 cities in Australia, 2 or 3 cities in New Zealand. I was going to fly to Canada and Mexico City, all within the next sort of 5, 6, 7 months. And we had so much booked up. And then one by one, what happened was, as the country started to close, the city started to close, boom, 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 they all started to get taken off the schedule. And before I knew it, within a couple of weeks, I was sitting at my home, had all my plans changed for the year. And I was like, what am I going to do now? And instantly the thought just came to me was, I'm going to do my podcast now, because I was prepared to go and spread my message and train thousands of people around the world. I'm going to put it all into a podcast, because that was one of the reasons. The reason was we just got into lockdown, and I'm like going nuts already on day one. I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I'm going to create this podcast. So it literally started, and then 2 weeks later, I had it up and launched. And obviously, I learned everything what not to do, learned everything how to do it by just failing forward and doing it. And within our first 100 days, we went to top 100 in Australia. And then I kept going. We did an event off the back of it, because people were like, hey, we did like a meetup in person. We had 100 people come, and one thing kind of led to another. And then I remember doing like a relaunch about a year or so later. Then we went to like number 6 in Australia, and just sort of started like that. Like, I started getting strangers DMing me, people coming to me on the street to be like, I listen to your podcast. And I never like really understood the importance of what a podcast can do to your brand. Like, it truly elevates you, because people, like, I was building on Instagram, I was building on every platform for years. And it wasn't until I did this, and all I did was, I was that guy that used to do Facebook Lives once or twice a week. And I had the show. I was like, Monday, fucking whatever they called it, right? I forget what they called it. And I did a live every single week. And I had my mom come to it, and 3 other people, right? And I got 100 plays or whatever it is, right? All I did was transition that value into an episode and put it onto a platform, and instantly elevates my brand. And I never got it until that happened. And then look, here we are, nearly 3 years, actually. This month, it's been 3 years since I've launched my podcast, and we've done over 200 episodes. I've now been able to connect with, I've had Cohen Ray on, Les Brown, Dr. John D. Mark Victor Hansen, some of the biggest speakers, trainers, authors, and thought leaders in the whole space of business, personal development, entrepreneurship, just because I was committed to actually start it. So yeah, that's kind of how it started.
I love that so much, because yes, we are creating content all the time. If you're in online business and if you're on social media, creating content, whether you know it or like it or not. And this is just such a more professional and evergreen platform to be creating it on. So yeah, when I don't even know how I came across you. I think that's right. I posted on Facebook and said, I'm looking for a podcast coach. Does anyone know? And a mutual friend of ours tagged you in it. And then I was like, oh, wow, he's got a course. He's got a really epic podcast. I really loved your personal brand. And there was so much credibility in your personal brand. And we know the best business always comes from recommendations, right? From word of mouth and someone actually genuinely being like, this guy's awesome. This is who you need. So I'm very grateful for you that you went down that path, because I really wanted to learn, properly how to launch podcasts. I had no idea either. And when you then checked in a couple of months ago with me and you were like, how's the podcast going? I think I've got something that could be really valuable. It also came down to your personal brand, because I was like, you wouldn't mention that or reach out to me if it wasn't personal, because we've worked together before. Right. And I did a story set about this at the time, but I was like, the best business is always done through valuing relationships. And so at that time, Morgan came to me and he was like, I've got something that I think could be really valuable. He'd just started a podcast agency and had this epic offer to like relaunch a podcast and outsource the content and do all these amazing things. And I was like, this is crazy, because in my magical script, I literally had, I want to be the number one I want Wildly Empowered Women to be the number one podcast. And I hadn't worked out the how, I just had the goal. Like the goal was there. And as my human design is projector, and I'm supposed to like wait for the invitation. I'm doing this in inverted commas because like as an A-type driven personality, it's fucking hard to be like, I have this goal and I'm just going to wait for the invitation for it to come along. But that actually happened with Morgan. So I loved the way that it came about, and that is where I've been, is working with Morgan and his team on relaunching and just upgrading so much of this podcast, so much of the production, the equipment, the conversation, the output, like everything. And I thought, obviously I wanted to update the listeners on this and appreciate you guys so much for consistently joining and being part of the journey. But I also wanted Morgan on here to talk about this, because what I've just done is very typical of where you get to in business, where you need to know when is the right time to invest in both your business and your personal development. And they both come down to your personal brand, right? So I know, Morgan, you've been like such a big believer in investing in yourself, and you have come so freaking far in your business and in who you are, and what you've created is exceptional. How would you say when to actually invest into yourself or into your business and take that next step?
Yeah, it's a broad question, but here's the thing. I think if someone's asking the question, now is the right time, because there's never really the wrong time to start investing into yourself. Like I've invested, I'm 29 years old now. I started doing personal development and all this when I was 21 years old. And in the last 8 years, I've invested close to $250,000 now. And, when I first started doing it, I had, my parents and stuff being like, you should be buying a house. And I look back on it now, it's like, where else, like I put this $250,000 roughly over the last 8 years, and like where else can I get something that's brought me now? Probably a 10x or more, probably 10x more ROI, easy. In the last 8 or so years, while having a whole bunch of freedom as well. Because at the end of the day, look at all the crazy stuff's happening in the world right now. The banks, the brick system, all this crazy fear and whatever's happening. If the world plummets and everyone loses their jobs, or like the worst, I'm just saying the worst case scenario could ever happen. The one thing that no one could ever take away from you is your knowledge and who you are as a person. So the number one asset in the world is not bricks and mortar. It's not businesses. It's not the stock market. It is yourself. We've got to invest in ourselves before anything else, because you could even look at this. Okay, look, I've got $5,000. What do I do with it? Do I start a share portfolio, or do I invest it into myself? And I'd ask the question, well, let me ask you a question. Are you an absolute expert in the stock market? And if the answer is, well, no, I'm not. I don't actually know dick about the stock market. Okay, well, here's what I'll do. Take the $5,000, invest it into a program to learn about the stock market, and then go and learn, then invest your money. Because here's what's going to happen. I guarantee it. You put your 5K in the stock market, it'll probably vanish into nothing, because you'll buy some sort of get rich quick shit coin or something like this, trying to really blow it up, because you haven't built the emotional intelligence, you haven't built the skill set of it, and perhaps even the nervous system, the body, to actually obtain and acquire those types of wealth and riches, right? So investing in yourself is the most important thing, I'll say, till the cows come home. That's why I have a personal development company. But how to know when it's the right time is, if it's a little scary and a little exciting, then that's probably a good sign that it's for you. I'm a big believer that the universe is going to throw things in your face to either say to you, this is your step, this is what you've been asking for, this is the sign, right? Or it's going to say, this is a distraction, and I'm going to test you to see how bad you want the thing you said you want. And the more you work on yourself, the better aware you're going to become at like actually deciding this. There was this biblical story of this guy sitting on his roof when the whole world's flooding, right? And the water's going up, and this guy comes past in his boat, and he says, "Oh, hey, buddy, if you stay up there, you're going to drown. Jump off into my boat." And he says, "No, thank you. God will save me. God will save me." And then the water keeps coming up all the way up to his neck, and someone drives past another boat, and he says, "Dude, jump on my boat." And he's like, "No, thank you. God will save me. God will save me." And the next minute, the water comes all the way up to his eyeballs, and this dude comes past, and he's treading water, and he comes past, and he throws him a ring. He's like, "Come into my boat. I'll save you." He said, "No, thank you. Blah, 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 blah. God will save me." And the guy drowns, and he goes up to heaven. He walks right up to God, and he's like, "Yo, what was that all about?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean? I sent you 2 boats and a guy sending you out a freaking thing to try and rescue you. What else more do you want?" Right? And so if we're gonna ask the universe, ask God or whatever for what it is we want, it's not always gonna come. In fact, it's probably never gonna come at the time where you're ready, where you think you're ready. Keyword, where you think. It's not gonna feel like, "Oh my God, this is perfect and it's in alignment." It's gonna feel like, "Oh my God, I know this is the sign. That's why it's been given to me. I've been asking for it. I've been writing in my magical script. It's not, this is literally the thing I've asked for, or this is the thing that's going to get me to what the thing I've asked for. It's here right now. Here's my chance to step forward into growth." Like that's the main thing. So how you know when it's ready is to actually, if it's there in front of you, take every single opportunity. That's my belief. I really don't think you can go too far backwards in life. A lot of the time people think it's like, if I invest right now, I'm going to lose all my money, and it's not going to happen. Come on. You've made it this far in life. You're always going to get back on your feet. You're going to learn something. But usually what happens is when you invest in yourself and you apply the things you learn, you'll come out the other side 10 times better, 10 times bigger, 10 times more wealthier, and all these sorts of things if it's the right thing. And the other time I know when it's the right time to invest is before you're ready. So like I've done this with hiring staff for my business. If I'll hire before I'm ready for the position that we're building into. Because that right person could help us actually get the revenue, get the business, get everything we need to do in order to actually pay their wage properly. But a lot of times I've done it, it's been a lot scarier at the time than it has felt perfect. That's why I take action from where I want to be versus acting from where I am.
That is such a good sentence. And I can so relate to that, because every time I've invested in a system that's been quite a big investment, or, virtual assistants or anything like that, it's been before I'm earning the money that I typically assumed I would have to earn to do that. And it's always gotten me to that goal quicker, because you're putting in place the systems and the support that you need in order to get to your goal. So yeah, I love that answer so much. And also what you said about, I want to just reiterate this about investing into yourself, because that is such a number one asset that we all have, is our own knowledge, our own personal growth. You can lose a business. Look at Richard Branson. He's lost plenty of businesses, have failed, but because of his experience and his knowledge and who he is, he'll always be able to be successful because he's invested in himself and in his knowledge.
Yeah, well, like Donald Trump's a good example, right? He was a billionaire and then lost everything, came back and become a billionaire again. Now, you can only do that if who you believe at the core is, "I'm a billionaire." You attract those things. You like that. That's so. Yeah, it's so true, because you can take everything away from you, but you can never take away your knowledge and who you actually are as a person. So it's the most important area. I think people should invest in them before they invest anywhere else. Yeah. Like I haven't bought a house yet. And people are like, "Oh, when are you going to buy a house?" And I'm like, it's just the wrong thinking. Who told you that you need to get a house right away? Like but funny enough, actually, we're looking at getting a property this year, but it's only because we've invested in a property coach who's teaching us the things about property. Because a saying that changed my life a long time ago is this: poor people, right, or broke people will invest time to make money, but rich people will invest money to get time. And I'll always look for the who, not how. Like, I always look for who can I hire to do this one task, these few tasks, that I would pay them less than what I know I can make in the hour. For example, the first time I did this, when it really clicked for me, was I found myself once a week driving to the supermarket and going to do all my shopping. And I'd hate it, by the way, but I'd spend a solid, at least before I go there, I come back, at least an hour and a half. And then I have all my food for the week and I have to cook it and blah, 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 blah. Probably 4 hours a week at least is taken up doing this. That's a lot of money. And then one day I was like, I'm going to hire this little uni student girl. I paid her $30 an hour. She went and did all my shopping, brought it to the house, cooked all my food for the week, and prepared everything. And then I'd pay her for the 4 or 5 hours a day, right? Once a week, she'd do that. The first time I did this, I went upstairs, did a sales call, and closed $5,000. I was like, that's why I hire somebody, so I can get 5 hours of my life back a week to put into the things that I'm good at, where I can make more money.
Amen, brother. This is why I've had a virtual assistant for so long as well. Like if you're doing a task that someone else could do for you, you are not optimizing your time. Like that's not you in your genius zone. If you're spending time doing menial things and they all add up, right? Like that's a great example of the shopping and the cooking. It's also like the cleaning and the washing and even the small things like social media, right? Like if you write a post and then you want to repurpose it across like 5 different accounts, you don't need to be the one to do that. Like that is not something in your genius zone. If you've already created it, you can get.
That's why we're doing it for you.
For me with this podcast, like there's going to be so many different pieces of content made from me sitting down and doing like investing 1 hour of my time to make a podcast episode and the immense amount of value I get from that with content. It's like, you really need to sit down and go, okay, what am I spending my time on every single week and what can be done that's not me? Because, we had the cleaner come yesterday. I hired a cleaner 5 years ago when I started my online business before I had any income coming in. Like there was no way I could warrant the cost of a cleaner, but I knew I needed to because I needed to free up that time to build my business as well. So yes, such value in that. I hope you guys are loving this. So let's talk about personal branding because, you've sort of built this amazing personal brand probably when you started out not even knowing that you were building a personal brand. It's sort of like a bit of a buzzword the last couple of years. But what would your tips be for anyone wanting to build a really authentic personal brand based on what they love and what their passion is? Before we go on, I want to ask you a super powerful question. What would it mean to you to make decisions based on your soul rather than your bank balance? Freedom to me means having true autonomy and choice in your life to live based off your values and soul's desires, rather than what you can purely afford for you and your family or what your job requires of you. This is why I've been empowering women for the past almost 5 years to earn more with pleasure, earning your true worth without the insane hustle and with actually having choice in your life. It is so much more about how you earn rather than what you earn. If you'd like to learn more about how I mentor women to earn a time-leveraged income online, selling conscious, health-based products and learning the skills of personal branding and attraction marketing, both very sexy skills to have, then click on the link in the show notes or DM me the word info on Instagram so we can have a proper chat. I love having one-on-one convos with you savvy queens and showing you how this kind of income and our community can help you truly live wildly empowered. Big love, back to the episode.
Yeah, look, I can dive into this. So when I first started talking about personal branding, I looked at it like this. I'm like, you got to be 2 to 3 brand pillars. Like, what are you going to be known for, right? And now what I know now, I'll break it down even deeper for you on what really elevates a brand and how do you stand out as a brand. But I think every single brand's going to be known for 2 or 3 things maximum. In the beginning, for example, let's look at, imagine if Jeff Bezos was like, we're going to create a website. And on this website, I'm going to sell books, music, videos, electronics, home stuff, and just about any single thing you can think about. You probably look at Amazon or you look at Jeff Bezos and be like, cool, I don't get what you do though. Because you do everything. But Jeff started by saying, we sell books, period. That's it. And he becomes so good at that, so known for that. Then he added on, oh, but we also sell this thing as well, and this thing as well, and this thing, and now we sell any single thing we want, and it's Amazon. And same with Nike. I went and watched the Nike movie the other day, actually, which was a fantastic movie. And back in, I'm going to butcher it, in the 90s, I think it was, they were one of the smallest shoe brands in the world. So they only had 17% share of the whole shoe market. Adidas and Converse took the other two sides. But Nike started by being known just for amazing running shoes. That's it. We were an athletic shoe. Run, 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 run. And then what really pivoted to them was really branching out into a new market. So they said, we need to get into the NBA. And that's where they signed Michael Jordan. They gave him his exclusive sneaker, blah, 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 blah. The rest is history. A few short years later, Nike actually ended up buying Converse and now absolutely dominate the shoe industry. Probably one of the biggest brands in the entire, not only world, but athletic space. Like they just dominate. And so it all started because of one thing. So you got to ask yourself, like, what's the 1, 2, or 3 things maximum you're going to be known for? And how can they kind of correlate together? For example, when I first started, I was building a health and wellness online business. So I was like, well, I got to be known for health and wellness. The next thing is I want to be known for travel and create freedom. And then probably like entrepreneurship type thing. And then the only 3 things I would talk about, I would not talk about dogs or cats. I would not talk about arts and crafts. I would not talk about none of this stuff. Now it's developed a little bit more. Stories change the game. See, we can really be known for our main content as 2 to 3 things, but then in our stories really show the behind the scenes of everything. In fact, people want to see, are you a dog lover or a cat lover? What did you eat for breakfast? They want to see that shit, but on the front end, they want to know why they're coming to your shop front every single day, and they want to know that they're getting the thing they signed up for. So if one day you're talking about self-care and relationships and stuff like this, and then tomorrow you're talking about business, you're talking about, I don't know, starting a dog wash, but I don't know, just something random. People would come over and the true G fans would be like, oh my God, congrats, Sally, that's amazing, you go, girl. But they're going to be confused. They probably won't buy anything. They probably won't do business. They might just be like, oh, I don't know what you do now. Right? But if you talk about self-care and you talk about relationships and then you start a business in self-care and relationships and doing all that, you're starting to create like this following and this brand where people know you for that thing now, right? But here's the thing. What makes a brand the best in the world comes down to 2 things, is love and trust. Every single brand in the world, especially the biggest, they're only the biggest because they've built enough love with you and enough trust with you, period. Nothing else. So most people think branding is a logo. Most people think personal branding is having an Instagram account. It's none of that. What personal branding is how can I build enough love with my audience? How can I build enough trust with my audience so they know, like, and trust me enough to want to follow, do business, and tell their friends about me? How we build enough love with people is how, like, I think a lot of people know about the 5 love languages. So how can we incorporate the 5 love languages into what we actually do in our business every single day? How can we be mindful of actually giving our customers and our followers words of affirmation, gifts, like giveaways, being authentic, spending quality time, doing lives, all these sorts of things. Like for years, I hosted meetups. I did Sunday fun days every single month. I do Facebook Lives. I do my podcast. I DM people. So if people DM me on Instagram, I reply to nearly every single one. Like there's a whole bunch that are unread, but if people message me, like if they never get theirs actually read by me, they've just got to message me again and then it bumps up the top and usually I'll get it. But I'm so personal like that. And I know that's where I've been able to build quite a lot of love with all my people because I focus on these things, right? Okay, well, the 2 main things. First thing is this. If you get started a personal brand, commit to being here a year from now. That's the biggest thing. Because there's so many people that pop up on Instagram. Perfect example, I was trying to think of a Facebook ads manager the other day that I had a conversation with about 2 years ago. And I was like, where's this person? I went looking for them, couldn't find them anywhere. I was like, huh. And then they actually popped back up on Instagram the other day and I messaged her. I was like, oh my God, I thought you died. She's like, oh, actually, yeah, I took it, took time off Instagram. I was like, well, that's weird because now I don't trust you. You're flaky. I don't want you to manage my stuff. I don't know what was happening in her world. Sure. But here's the thing. Consumers, they don't give a crap because consumers want to know that the thing, like if you go and get the most amazing sushi in town, you go to this one restaurant and you know that every single time you go there, you're going to get the best sushi. And then one day you tell all your friends, you say, oh my God, girls, ladies, babes, let's go down and have sushi. Then you take all your friends down there and the sushi restaurant is either closed or now they sell burgers. You're going to be like, what the hell? And you're going to be embarrassed. It's like, well, I'll never come here again. Doesn't matter how good it was, you're on to the next. And that's the unfortunate thing about the consumer market. Okay. So building trust is literally just being here a year from now. Keep doing the thing you've always done. Like if you look in the world right now, the people like, Grant Cardone, the Bob Proctor before he died, like all these people who are the biggest in the world, they're not necessarily better than anyone else who's also studying similar things. They're only perceived as the best because people trust them because they've been around for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Like Bob Proctor talking about law of attraction, law of vibration, all these sorts of things. There's amazing learnings out today in today's world with people that probably even teaching better stuff. But people will pay 10 times more because it's Bob Proctor because he's been doing it for 50, 60 years. He's the GOAT. That's it, period. You can't compete with that, right? You just got to be in the game for long enough. If a shoe market popped up on the street today and it's like, hey, we actually produce the best shoes, they might be 10 times better than Nike's, which to be honest, wouldn't be hard to do. But in order to get a market share of that, it's going to take you probably minimum a decade, minimum, I would really assume. For anyone to actually start to trust you enough where they want to buy your stuff over Nike, Adidas, Converse, Puma, all these other ones. So building trust for your audience is really, that's one of the main things. Being consistent, being committed to it, and being here and doing the thing you said you're going to do. The second thing is how can you build authority through people who already do have the trust? So with my podcast, that's really been able to elevate me when I start to interview people that were very trustworthy, that had been in the game for a long time. When I can go on a podcast with them and people see like, oh my God, Morgan's associated with this person now, they instantly look at me and go, oh, I trust him as well now, right? But I've been building a personal brand for 5-6 years now. And I honestly feel like I'm just about to hit a curb where we're going to grow. Like probably over the next 2-3 years, I think we'll see massive growth in my brand. And people are like, oh my God, it just happened. I was like, bro, I've been like, we've done 500, 600 podcast episodes now, YouTube videos, hundreds out there, spoken on hundreds of stages, thousands of podcasts. Like, no, it didn't happen overnight. It compounded where people are like, I've actually heard this guy for years talking about the same stuff. He must really know it. And that's what builds the trust. So, the three biggest things I can give you guys is you got to be known for something. So pick 2 or 3. What are going to be your brand pillars? What is going to be you got to be known for? Speak about the things you're interested in. Talk about the things that you're curious just to learn more of. Talk about the things you're passionate about, because chances are those things probably won't change. If you talk about things you love, you're passionate about, you're good at, and you're curious to learn more about, you'll probably be able to talk about that for a long time. And then just keep doing it long enough so people eventually will take you seriously, and any opportunity you can, partner with people that collaborate with people that do have the trust already, and you'll eventually start to get trust there. But essentially branding 101 comes down to those 2 things. Your audience have to love you and they've got to trust you.
That is such good advice. I always say to my team, it's the know, like, trust factor. and the knowing comes from just, sharing and being vulnerable and sharing your story and stuff. So such great advice. I also, before we get on to the very exciting, massive project that you've been working on that we'll talk through, you have asked someone to collaborate with you that is a very well-known personal brand and someone that I look up to and is an incredible person to partner with. And I want to talk a little bit briefly first on how those things come about, because I think that people might see like guests that you've had on your podcast, for example, and be like, oh my God, Dr. Demartini, like how did that come about? And it's like, you know what? You just have to be bold in your business and ask the fucking question, because what's the worst that can happen? They say no, but you've made a connection with them and they might say yes next time. So this is something that I've started to do with my podcast, which, and you and I spoke about this, about like, who can I ask to be on the podcast? And I have actually messaged or emailed about 10 different women who I really, really look up to, who I'm really looking forward to having on the podcast. And I just haven't stopped following up with them until they say no. And I do not care. It is not a personal rejection to me. Like I'm not taking it personally if someone doesn't have the capacity to do a podcast episode with me. But I reached out to, and a couple of them have said yes, which has been really exciting. And I reached out to my absolute, like, she's been on my vision board to be on the podcast, like my absolute muse, right? And I reached out to her and I asked her for an interview yesterday. And I was like, why haven't I done this sooner? Like, she's someone I look up to so much. I know her book back to front. I ran a
Who is it?
friggin' book. Okay, so it's
Can we-
Regina Thomas Hewer, who wrote the book Pussy. And
Okay.
she's literally like a goddess. Like, she's just like such a role model. I love her book. I have probably bought about 20 like copies of her book to give to people. I ran a book club of it. I've got a whole highlight on my Instagram of her book, right? So I'm actually probably the perfect person to interview her. But I hadn't reached out to her yet because I didn't feel like the podcast or my content or what I could offer her was good enough yet. Right. So it's kind of like leaving it until I could say, like, I'm number one or I'm this or I'm that or whatever. And then I was like, you know what? Who cares? Like, if she's like, show me some stats and I'd love to come on when you have X amount of listeners, then I know what I'm working towards. That's the worst that could happen, right?
Yeah.
The best that could happen is that she sees this message from me where I'm genuinely like fangirling out, being like, I adore you. Like, I've bought her paid products and stuff as well, like other courses and stuff. Like, I genuinely really know her and her message very well. I'm not just like some random person asking for a podcast interview because I want to leverage her audience or anything, right? Like, which I'm sure she gets a lot. I actually genuinely know who she is and what she stands for. And my point here, because I want to move on to your incredible event, is what is the worst that could happen if you actually ask for what you want? And if you actually ask someone to collaborate? Like, the worst that could happen is they say no and you move on.
Well, I think the worst thing that can happen is you grow because, like I did the exact same thing in the beginning. I was like, I wanted one of my friends, like he's a friend of mine, but he's big. And I was like, I wanted him to come on my podcast. Oh, do you think he would? I was like, I don't want to overstep the boundaries I've made. And, and I got so in my head and I didn't talk to him about it for about 2 months. And then I hit him. I was like, hey, bro, hey, while we're chatting, you wouldn't mind coming on my podcast, blah, blah, blah. And I was so like worried that he was going to be like, turn me down, be like, nah, like, he's like, oh, hell yeah, man, that'd be sick. Like, come around, we'll do it in person. Let's shoot some good content. I'm like, oh my God. And then I was just like, it's so dumb. Like, why? Because here's the thing. Everyone, especially in this day and age, everyone's wanting to grow their brand. Everyone's wants to grow their brand. People want to grow their audience. So to get on another podcast, they really want to do that, period. Yes, some of the really big ones, they might go, well, why would I want to come on your show? You get 100 downloads when I can just put something on my show where I can get 10,000 downloads or whatever. Fair enough. But people sometimes, they're not really understanding that they can get in front of 100 brand new people, right? And it's a platform to speak on. So a lot of people, that's what they want these days. But I went through the exact same stuff. But you're saying, like, what's the worst thing that can happen if people say, you hit somebody up and they're not into it? You grow, because here's the thing: you start to realize that, hey, the no or the yes doesn't mean anything about who I actually am at the core. If they say yes, that doesn't mean that I'm better than the ones they say no to. That doesn't mean that I'm amazing, I'm special, I had a good pitch, nothing. And if they say no, it also doesn't mean that you're not good enough, you're shit, blah, 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 blah. Because there's so many factors. I turn down podcasts because sometimes I'm just busy. Like right now, I've pushed every single podcast except yours back to next month. So I'm like, I got other things on my diary this month and I'm just not doing it. Not to say I don't want brand audience and whatever. I just can't fit it in. Bandwidth wise, I'm not. Doesn't mean anything about anyone else's show. It just literally means my schedule. And that's also, I have a choice to say what I want to do in my life. It means nothing to do with anybody else. So I think the worst case scenario is people can actually grow from hearing a no from somebody and being like, oh, how can I fall in love with the process of people actually saying no to me? I want more people to say no to come on my show than they say yes, because that means I'm asking people big enough, right? If everyone said yes, I would be like, it's too easy. Either my show is really good, which I know it's great, but it's not like a diary CEO. I want people, that like I want some massive people who are saying, hey, not right now, but come back, in a year when you've got these downloads and blah, 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 and I'm like, absolutely. That's what I'm aiming for.
Love that. So Let's talk about who you've been working with and what you've been working on that's coming up in a couple of months. That is really just such an exciting thing to be mentioning on this podcast.
Yes. Yeah. So we've got Dreamfest again. So last year I ran Dreamfest, which was a freaking insane day. A lineup of literally some of the best personal development speakers, business speakers in the world. I had Dr. John DeMartini speak at it. I had Daniel G speak at it, and a hell of a lineup of other people here in Australia. Like, it was just freaking amazing. And everybody since have asked me, they're like, "When's the next one? When's the next one?" I'm like, next year, I guess. So I'm like, I'm committed to us where every single year we're gonna have a Dreamfest event, and so we've got it back on. It's gonna be on the Gold Coast, and yeah, we've got a lineup of some of the most amazing speakers. Firstly, we've got Annika Harris, who is known on social media as the Pink Sparrow Social, where her social media, she's just the reels queen. Online branding, online branding for business owners and creating reels and content. She is the go-to. She's probably like one of the freaking best in the world. She's speaking. We've got Aaron Sansoni, Aaron Sansoni is probably arguably, I would say, number 1 or 2 business coach and trainer in Australia. Like, he's like in the same conversation with Cohen Ray, been around the same time. Like, they both absolutely kill it. Actually, I'd probably say he's number 1. Actually, like, he's gonna crush it. So he's gonna come in and help people actually teach them business fundamentals, teach them where business is going right now and how to actually build a business empire and buy other businesses and just absolutely freaking kill it. He's a savage. He's gonna be amazing. We've got Lloyd Ross, who's a good friend of mine, teaching people how to actually build an investment portfolio and to get rich for sure, not get rich quick. You know, I know a lot of your followers are in, network marketing, affiliate marketing, stuff like that. This is one thing I wish I started at a younger age. I wish I took my extra money and put it into proper investments instead of like just increasing my lifestyle, because I would have been a lot further along right now. And then, our big keynote speaker is James Smith. So he's obviously a fucking beast. He's a super funny dude, but when it comes to social media and business and intelligently building a social media platform of raving fans, and then building a business off the back of it, I don't think there's anyone better in the world right now than him. He is a hot commodity right now, so he's going to be coming to the Gold Coast live in person. So we've got a jam-packed day. It's going to be freaking full on. Obviously, I'm going to be there, like, delivering heaps of value on mindset and transforming your belief systems and fears and all these sorts of things too. We really want people to sort of come to this event and at the end of it leave. Like, last year, people left and they didn't stop talking about it for like a month or 2, and they're like just ignited this fire inside of them to take their life more seriously, take their business more seriously, and just to blow it up in all areas of life. So we want to do that again, but 10 times bigger, 10 times better this year. So it's going to be sick.
So, Morgan, if anyone wants to find you on socials, work with you, learn more about your offers, and just stalk your incredible content, where are the best places for them to find you?
Yeah, look, best 3 places now, actually. Number 1 is Instagram. That's my place. I reply to all my DMs. I'm on there every single day at Morgan T. Nelson. You'll find us there. Come say hi. Second one is my podcast, Dream Out Loud. Like you said before we jumped on, you've been binge listening to it today. I've so much content on there. It's insane, really, especially if you're in business, entrepreneur, or just wanting to really get more out of life. That's your place. And then I've got my website. I don't really know what you'll do on there, but you can kind of just check it out. I'll plug it because it's brand new and it costs me a lot of money, but it's pretty cool. So morgantnelson.com, you can kind of check out everything we do, how we do it. But yeah, otherwise, come say hi in the DMs.
So if you want to have a further look at Dreamfest, the link is in the show notes. Myself and my team will be there. It's going to be absolutely epic. So take a look at that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be sick. Before we wrap up, I'd love to ask you the same question that I ask all of my guests on this show. If you could go back to your 21-year-old self and just give him a massive big hug and tell him something that maybe he needed to hear, what would that be? Before we wrap up this episode, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember how you discovered this podcast? Was it a friend's suggestion or an Instagram story, maybe a post? Somehow you found it, and I'm hoping you're getting a lot of value from it. I need your help now to pay it forward so that other women can feel seen, heard, nourished, and more than anything, empowered from these conversations too. Big love. Back to the episode.
I would tell him to take investing more seriously. Take investing more seriously and start building a portfolio now, even with as little as you have or whatever you're doing right now. And the second thing would be to stop giving a fuck what other people care of you and what they think of you a lot sooner, because as soon as you do that, you have a lot more freedom and a lot more success.
So good. I love the masculine answer. I love that there was investing in there and then there was some personal development. That is such a good combination. I love that.
And of course, I'll do the whole I love you, you're seen, you're safe, and I'll do that stuff as well, right?
Yeah, of course. I absolutely agree with those two things, though. That's what's gotten you to where you are today as well, those two things, right? So beautiful advice. If you enjoyed this episode and if there was anything that you really took from Morgan's amazing wisdom in this episode, please feel free to screenshot it, share it in your stories on Instagram, tag myself and Morgan. His Instagram will be in the show notes as well. And as always, so appreciative if you can leave a review and a rating, because that's what helps this podcast be seen by more wildly empowered women and get the message out there. So thank you so much for joining, Morgan.
How about I give something to your audience?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
How about we give them, I'll give out one free VIP so they can come, they get VIP access, networking, they get to meet the speakers and stuff. They need to do, they take this episode, share it to their social media, tag us both, right? But they have to do it when it's released, okay?
Yeah.
So when it's released, so the day it gets released, right? So if you're listening to this right now, do it right now. Share it to your story. Tag me at Morgan T. Nelson. Tag Jessica as well. And then Jessica, you just share. You pull out any one of those people. You tell me who it is. I'll shout them out and I'll give them a free ticket to Dreamfest.
Heck yes. Thank you. That's so generous. That is so freaking awesome and exactly what you spoke about on this episode with the love languages and gifting. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and for being the first male. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. So yeah, make sure that you share it, and thank you so much for joining, Queens. I will see you on the next episode.